Welcome back to Strategy Asia, brought to you by Metaliq Media. I'm Eric Rosenkranz, and I will be your host. Today, we're very happy and fortunate to have Apichai Sakulsureeyadej with us. Apichai is what we call a serial entrepreneur. He's founded a number of different companies, and we're going to talk to him today about the companies he's founded and especially about his business strategy. Apichai, welcome to Strategy Asia.
Thank you, Eric.
So, tell us, you're an entrepreneur. Which companies have you founded?
Well, I run a company called MSL Software. It is a pure software company based in Thailand. And we do government projects. So our projects involve about 6 ministries, so about half the government, and a lot of the back-end financial clearing of the country, a lot of the export systems, a lot of the back-end software that runs the country, a lot of national systems. That's the stuff that my company does.
Okay, so you said pure software. What does that mean, pure
software? An IT firm generally has there are 3 sides of technology. There's telecommunications, there's hardware, and then there's software. So we're focused purely on the software applications.
So that means you have a bunch of engineers sitting around?
Yes, so we have a bunch of engineers that are supposed to be innovating and creating value based on applications that they write to solve problems.
Okay, so let me stop you. Let's talk about problems, because one of the themes of this series is that companies succeed by solving customer problems.
Sure.
So let's start. Who are your customers?
Predominantly, majority of my customers are the government agencies. For example, the central bank, processing all the financial clearing in the country, the Ministry of Commerce that handles all the exports and commerce related.
Well, let's talk about the central bank.
Sure.
So, what do you do for them?
Well, one of the bigger projects that we've done that's sort of our flagship is the check clearing, check archiving for Thailand. Okay. So every piece of check that's written every day is cleared and then stored on our system. And all 44 banks and all branches have to access the system in order to see the results and if they need to retrieve and all of that data post-clearing. So there's a lot of tallying, there's a lot of numbers involved, and it involves a lot of high scrutiny, credibility, reliability. So that's a massive system that we've done for the central bank.
So you said you solve problems. So
Correct.
What's the problem that you're solving for this government ministry?
Particularly this case, previous to the implementation of this system, if we went out of Bangkok, went out of the main cities, in some villages where there are bank branches, clearing a check could take up to 5 working days. Now it's 1 working day.
Okay, so how did you do that?
So because checks are now being sent back electronically with digital signatures, they're being processed faster, and the results are being stored for retrieval in a faster manner. All of that helps in clearing it a lot faster rather than having to transport the physical paper.
I really like what you're saying, because one of my beliefs is that companies go wrong when they start creating products in isolation.
Correct.
Without
Correct.
first really understanding what their customer problem is.
Correct.
So when you started MSL Software, did you start with a product? Did you start with a customer? How did you get the company off the ground?
This was almost 15 years ago, and I think it was very much, this was very early days of the internet. So applications were very enterprise, very client-server, hardware dependent. And at that time, we were lucky to bring in some good software, met some clients who had the needs, and learned along the way. I guess the starting point was being lucky in finding good clients who were willing to pay some decent amount, and that kick-started a momentum. First 3 or 4 years, there were a lot of ups and downs because we were going through a learning phase.
So tell us, what were some of the ups and downs? I'm really interested in the downs.
Sure.
And how you recovered from those.
Sure. As the first point was, it was 2000, 2001. Southeast Asia wasn't adopting technology as fast as the Western part of the world. A lot of people weren't even signed up on email at that point in time. And faxes were the telex and all of that were still communication.
Still using telexes.
At that point of time.
My God.
So going in and say, change the way you work, make it all electronic, was definitely a challenge.
And these were government agencies you were talking to then?
Not at
not
that
the
point.
beginning.
So
they were private.
They were still private. And the private sector funding software wasn't priority for them. IT was not priority. Manufacturers were worried about client retention. 2000, there was a global economic crisis. Post that, everybody was worried about recovery. So IT was the last thing on their mind. But I think that struggle, that period, taught us how to talk to people, show them value. We built reference cases, and we used that for the next client and the next client, because we learned along the way the value we were adding.
How would you describe that value?
For example, if we walked, at that point I was doing a lot of manufacturing software, and we walked into an organization that had a lot of stock, and the organization itself was using notebooks and paper to manage stock. That means accurate information about their stock and the period of time that they were keeping that stock and deterioration of it wasn't always available to the owners. But as we know, all stock is money at the end of the day. If they had accurate information, they could strategize better in terms of moving it around to clear it, and that could realize more money than they would pay for IT.
So for them, the problem was this old-fashioned way of monetizing their inventory.
Correct.
Okay, and they were losing money. So you were able to identify that. Did they know it was a problem, or did you have to tell them it was a problem?
They knew it was a problem. They just didn't know what better to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, at that point of time, they had always been comfortable, because that was stock that was left over and they didn't care about. They were making money in their manufacturing. But when crisis comes, then people turn inwards and see what else we can do. And that was, I think, we take the opportunity at that point to go and talk to them about clearing their stock, managing things better, managing costs better, automating some of the processes. And we convince them based on what we had already done for clients.
So I'm still interested in your early years. The first 2 or 3 years, you were struggling, I think, a little bit to convince people that software was the way to go. How did you finally make a breakthrough? Was it just selling at very low prices and giving up profit? Or was it just continuing to provide extra services? How did you actually get that breakthrough to convince people to buy your products?
Well, after doing work for some manufacturers, I got a chance to work with a hospital group, a very large, I would say one of the largest private groups here, or the largest one actually. And at that point, they were buying these very fancy ambulances. Ambulances for transporting people with heart problems, especially. They were spending a lot of money on the car, on the vehicle. But then they realize there's a problem. When the patient's coming and there's a lot of traffic and all of that, that moment is very critical. How do they save the patient at that point of time? You're talking early 2000s, and mobile was very, very new. And they brought me in to do a mobile application where a doctor could be sitting in any part of the country and view the patient's data real time. And they could view the patient's data at the hospital end and at the ambulance end, and then prescribe or make decisions. When we finished doing that project, I realized that this is going to change lives. This could save lives. And it hit me then that software is not just about organizing stock and inventory anymore. We can actually make a difference. And I think that motivated me some more to continue being in this industry. Then, as I said, I met my first government client who was talking about this grand scale project to transform an industry. And I thought this was also...
This is the check clearing.
Not yet. This is the textile, the Ministry of Industry.
Ah, so we haven't talked about that. So what was that?
So the Ministry of Industry got a budget from the IMF, and they needed to do an ERP.
What's ERP?
ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning, like a software that controls manufacturing in the company. And they wanted to produce an open source software.
So it sounds to me like you were not, how shall I say it, dogmatic as to the type of software you wanted to develop.
Correct, yeah.
You were open to, it could be an inventory management software, it could be time management with the ambulances, it could be the ERP. You were open, you just wanted to solve your clients' problems via software.
Correct.
But it wasn't, you've developed a certain type of software, now go out and sell it to people.
Correct. And that's absolutely correct. Even that philosophy still stands today and stronger. Today, our company's philosophy is we take on projects. We're very lucky. We're in a space, after all these years, we get to choose our clients and projects. So we have this philosophy where we only take on projects if it's going to add value.
To your company or to the client?
To the client, or the client's client. And we will only take on projects that have a huge impact to the client's organization.
Let's shift focus a little bit. I want to talk about your team. I want you to talk about your team. Okay. How do you go about building the right team?
Okay. In a software business, people are the most important assets because we're tapping on their mind and their innovativeness to bring out the best solutions to solve problems.
Apichai, we've been talking about this company you created called MSL Software, but you also started another operation called the Tourism Technology Association of Thailand. What was that?
Well, in about 2004, my family owns hotels, and I'm an IT guy. So it only made sense that an IT guy tries to do something about hotels. Because you see it every day, you want to add value to what's happening at home. And I sat down and thought about all the fancy things that I could do for the hotel business. And then I realized that alone, I couldn't think of much. So I decided to walk up to the government agencies. And that I was already starting to do government projects, so I wasn't intimidated.
So we have a common theme with MSL where you didn't start off by saying, here's a product or a service I want to develop. You went and talked to the ministries and recognized there was a problem.
Correct.
And that the Tourism Technology Association of Thailand is the solution to the fact that the government ministries weren't talking to each other.
Correct. And further than that is I realized that as each operator, each hotel, each travel agent did not know what to do about technology. They were working very traditionally. So at a higher level, the governments weren't talking. At a more immediate and ground level, the businesses were clueless. So we really needed to drive this.
So what's the biggest problem you've had to face in your whole career?
I think the biggest challenge ever is if you look at me, I don't look Thai. I'm by origin Indian, but I have a very Thai name. My Thai name's very long. I went to an American school or international school, and I studied in Australia for my college. It's such a multicultural mix. And then I decided to come back and work here. Walking into government organizations and looking non-native but being native, convincing them to trust me that I will solve your problems.
Well, that's a perfect segue toward kind of finalizing our program today. Let's talk about your strategy for the future.
Sure.
You've been 15 years, more or less. It sounds to me like you've had a few pivots along the way where you've changed your strategic direction. You've ended up with a company that uses software to solve your customers' problems. What does the future mean for you, for MSL? What does it mean for Apichai? Where are you going?
Well, I think we like what we do, but we need to, and we think if we talk about the Thai market, we're probably on the top tier for software. We want to now reach out further, so that also means more clients and all of that, but even regionally and internationally. We think at some point we will either consolidate, merge, or buy companies overseas in order to expand our portfolio, our team. And as I said earlier, now that we have a structure of working processes all in place and well, we're happy with it. I think growing from here is fairly automatic. Just making sure the people we tie up with or the people we buy or merge with are also strategic, are also solving problems.
We've been talking to Apichai, and I need to get this right, Sakulsureeyadej. How do you like that?
Yep.
Okay. And we're here at Strategy Asia, hosted by Eric Rosenkranz and brought to you by Metaliq Media. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you'll join us at our next episode.